Today we are going to talk about my most asked Tegu questions. Brumation, how long is it? When does it usually start? The next biggest question I usually get is in regards to humidity. Tegus, they grow so fast. Tegus can be pretty destructive. I get a lot of questions about attitude and personality and how that changes very rapidly.
Where'd he go? No!
Hey guys, how's it going? Today we are going to talk about my most asked Tegu questions, since we talked about Ackie Monitor questions previously and you guys seem to really like that. So let's get to today's video and I'll go over my most asked questions and maybe a part 2 eventually if I have a lot. Before getting to the video, I just want to remind you guys of the Patreon that will be in the top right. You can support for as low as $1. I'll talk about all that, the merch, and more at the end of the video. So the number one question I usually see in my inboxes is something related to enclosure and enclosure size. As you guys probably know, I have the T100 from Animal Plastics for my enclosure. That is 8x4x4 feet. I did a couple videos on that. I'll put one in the top right. But I would say that's the minimum in terms of what you should offer in size, 8x4x4. I see some people asking about putting them in like 6x3x3 or 6x2x2 or something like that. Either one of those I don't think are really an option. I think even 8x4x4 is a little bit small. So that's my opinions on that. I get that question sometimes. I also get enclosure size questions in reference to their age, baby, adult, whatever. Some people want to put them in something a little bit smaller than an 8x4x4 when they're babies. I think you should just put them right in there, especially Tegus. They grow so fast. Brumation is really the only stall in their growth. So I would really just put them right in their adult enclosure. It saves you money anyway from having two separate enclosures. But if you really want to, I guess a 6x3x3 or something around there would be fine until they really get into their growth spurt. That's probably around like 6-8 months in age, but really just go right into the adult enclosure. Otherwise, when it comes to enclosures, I like doing sort of a 3 different socket setup. I think it gives a diverse range of basking temperatures. You want some vents, but nothing too big because you want it to stay very humid, so you need it to really retain moisture. Only other thing I could think of really that I talk about, or really haven't talked about but probably should, is it's really kind of necessary to get a DIY or something set up for their basking slash hide. It's really hard to find a proper hide already made for a Tegu, and then also a basking spot that gets them within range of the heat they need. The next question I frequently get is in regards to brumation. How long is it? When does it usually start? So the earliest I've seen a Tegu brumate is probably late August, but usually sometime in September, October is pretty typical. In terms of waking up, you're usually always awake by the end of late April. I don't think any right now going into May or being in May, you should still be asleep. The length they usually go is pretty typically around 4 to 6 months, about 7 months the longest time. And I think they'll go down for at least a couple months if they go down. So 3 to 16 is pretty typical, maybe 3 to 7. But if your Tegu's still asleep right now, probably go check on them. I have a couple videos on brumation. It's kind of out of season right now since every Tegu is pretty much out of it. But if you're interested in learning more, check the top right. There's a video on brumation there. Now the next biggest question I usually get is in regards to humidity. Tegus are pretty hard to keep outside of Florida in terms of the natural environment and weather. You really need to have a high humidity level or there's a lot of problems that can happen. Stuck sheds are the biggest one if you have a low humidity level. So that's probably the number one sign, but there's usually also a lot of underlying problems you might not readily see in your Tegu, but they probably have if you're not offering enough humidity. So at minimum, I would keep every part of the enclosure at minimum 80%. If it dips down a couple of percent into the 70s, especially during the high point of the day, that's fine, or around the basking spot since that's really hard to keep up that high, but generally 80%, no less. Additionally, you probably want their hide to be higher than 80%, probably constantly 95+%, a place they can always retreat to that has maximum humidity levels. And at night, usually the humidity levels are high 90s, so those are ideal. Do not underestimate humidity. I got a lot of problems from it. But I corrected him and now he's good. The fourth biggest question I usually get is attitude changes. Tegus, especially when they're young, and especially when people are starting to get to know their Tegus because they're young, go through some drastic changes in terms of their behavior. There's puberty, where they go through sexual maturity. There's a lot to it. So I get a lot of questions about attitude and personality and how that changes very rapidly. So yes, Tegus will go through a lot of behavioral changes. Like I said, puberty, they'll get a lot more fierce and nasty. A lot of those mood swing type actions of them or behavioral changes of them are pretty common. To know if their behavioral change is something health-wise that's negative, look at their other things. Look at their bathroom habits. Look at their basking, the amount of time they bask. Look at how much they drink, eat. Are those all normal, the typical staple stuff? You can learn a lot from paying attention to your Tegu's bathroom habits, so that's how you'll know if a behavioral change is related to health. Another big thing I usually get frequently is the growth rate of Tegus. That's a big one. A lot of people also really underestimate the rate at which they grow. They grow really quickly, a lot quicker than a lot of reptiles. So you gotta really be ready for a big lizard pretty quick. Like I said earlier in the video, brumation's really the only stall for them growing, but if they skip brumation especially, they will get to a pretty large lizard probably within the first year. If they have brumation, probably within the second year. As an example, Frap, my Tegu, at around the 1.5 year mark, was probably around 4 feet long. That's probably when he hit 4 feet, maybe even sooner, and probably was at around 12-13 pounds, which is a good weight for an adult Tegu. So you can expect that a little past the year mark, them to be like pretty big. Now I know Hobbs, Dakota's Tegu from DBCB Exotics, is around Frap's age and is smaller, so he's not always the case, Frap being the size he is, but it is possible, and you should fully expect the worst case, them being, you know, a huge lizard at that time, so that is very possible, and you should be ready for that. So this is not a question I get a lot, but this is kind of turning into what to expect from a Tegu video, so I do want to mention it. Tegus can be pretty destructive. I mean, they are very intelligent reptiles, but they will jump for lights in your enclosure, and they will break them, shatter them, especially those expensive UVB strips. So I do kind of just want to mention that, since nobody really mentions it before you get a Tegu, and then you realize when you get one that you're just going to destroy their whole enclosure. So just note that. Whenever you put their enclosure together, make sure you put things just out of reach. They can jump really high though. Permanent Tegu free roaming is a big question in the hobby in general, so let's talk about that. I definitely do not think, especially after my whole humidity spiel I just went on and my humidity problems, that that's a viable thing you can do unless you're in Florida, where it's just naturally that humidity. So I implore you, if you do not live in Florida, do not let them permanently free roam. There's a lot to it that really needs to go right. You can't just have one area that has the humidity either and say that's enough. You need to have a proper enclosure with proper conditions. The last thing I want to bring up and talk about is just my customizations I have to my T100 from Animal Plastics. I get a lot of questions on what's customizable and what's not, and I don't think I mentioned that too well in my review of the product, which will be in the top right. Before specifying what exactly I think is customizable in there, I kind of don't fully remember. You can just call them and bring up the name John Armando, and they will tell you what I ordered so you can know the same exact customizations, but let's get into what I think they were. So one, I think, was the lights in there, the 3 sockets. You have to specify them as a customizable option. Additionally, I have 2 little bars for UVB going across. I really don't recommend them, but you can get them. Those were customizable. And then in the middle, I have sort of an arch for support. That was a customizable option. I believe the only other additions that were customizable were the glass. I did swinging instead of sliding. I don't think that was an additional cost though. I also have a lock on both my windows. Those were customizable and you had to pay for. But otherwise, I think that was mainly it. Again, you could just call them, say my name, and they'll tell you what I got anyway. Before wrapping up the video, I want to shout out Houston H, our new patron, Angela L, Herb M, and David T, all supporting the Patreon. You guys can support it for as little as $1. Check the description, really cool behind the scenes stuff. Once we get to 20, I'll be doing Patreon exclusive giveaways, and there's much more to come, so check it out. Oh, hi there. Looking for...
You can't even do it.
No, I turned too early. I can't turn majestically.
Oh.
Hi there. Want some exclusive reptile merch for your next convention? Make sure to check out my Teespring in the description. Designs are in the top right. buy them. Okay, guys, so that wraps things up. I appreciate watching the video. Let me know your feedback. Is there any other questions you have that I could do for a part 2? Also, the Herp Hour is on hiatus for a little bit. In the meantime, I do want to do something fun to make up for it. So I was thinking at the same time we usually do the Herp Hour, we'll do a Discord hangout. I posted that to the community page on the Professor Herp YouTube channel. If you're into the idea, let me know. I think I'm going to do it, but I just want to put this in a video. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. I always appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next video.